Assalamualaikum and good morning to Sir Hafriz and anyone who will be watching this video. Today, me, Shorhana, Iszhan, and my partner, Sofea, Khadijah, Binti, Zamani, will be presenting our poems on our chosen topic, which is family. So, as you can see from the table of contents, our respective poems are titled To My Sister and A Prayer for My Daughter. Without wasting any time, I will straight jump to the first presentation, and it is titled To My Sister, written by William Wordsworth. It is the first mild day in March, each minute sweeter than before. The redbreast sings from the tall larch that stands beside our door. There is a blessing in the air which seems a sense of joy to yield to the bare trees and mountains bare, and grass in the green field. My sister, 'tis a wish of mine, now that our morning meal is done. Make haste your morning task resign, come forth and feel the sun. Edward will come with you and pray, put on with speed your woodland dress, and bring no book for this one day will give to idleness. No joyless forms shall regulate our living calendar. We from today, my friend, will date the opening of the year. Love, now a universal birth, from heart to heart is stealing. From earth to man, from man to earth, it is the hour of filling. One moment now may give us more than years of toiling reason. Our minds shall drink at every pore the spirit of the season. Some silent laws our hearts will make, which they shall long obey, before the year to come may take our temper from today. And from the blessed power that rolls about below above, will frame the measure of our soul that shall be tuned to love. Then come, my sister, come, I pray, with speed put on your woodland dress, and bring no book, for this one day will give to idleness. So the writer of this poem is William Wordsworth. He is born with the name William Wordsworth on the 7th of April in the year 1770. He died around 80 years after that, which is on the 23rd of April, 1850. William is one of the English Romanticism founders, which is a movement of artistic, literary, and intellectual back in Europe. He also known for lyrical ballads, which is a book of a collection of his poems, which is also co-written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And he is known to be a loving brother to his sister, Dorothy Wordsworth. They were once separated after their parents' death. They were separated for quite some time, for a few years, and after they met, they were never apart again after that. Even when William got married, Dorothy still lived with him until her death comes. And Dorothy is very familiar to be in his poems because to William, Dorothy is a big plays a big role in his writing career and is also a big influence. So she appears many times in his writings, and this poem is one of them. So this poem is basically about the poet's wish to walk alongside his sister in the woods, and he wants his sister to enjoy walking in nature without having to bring any book, and he wants to be with his sister, understanding and be and blend to the nature better. So we can see how he um, loves the nature and also prioritize his sister in everything he do. Moving on to the theme, the big theme of this poem is nature, where he wants the reader to see the benefits of the nature to us humans, and apart from that, not to forget how he we can see from the poem that he has a very beautiful relationship with his sister, and it shows a very fond siblinghood between both of them. Moving on to the structure, I'm going to go very quickly into this. So this poem contains 10 stanzas altogether, and it is a quatrain, which means it contains 4 lines in every stanza, and every stanza is constantly ended with rhyme ABAB, and it is written in a ballad and really lyric uh, form. And the first 3 line of the stanza is iambic tetrameter, which there is four pairs of syllables, and the last line is iambic trimeter, where there is three three pairs of syllables, and to indicate that is the ending of each stanza. Moving on to the settings, so it does not mention specifically where it is written, but in the first stanza it says that stands beside our door, which means it is at their house. And based on my research, uh, it was the Wordsworth lived in a Foxton house back in Somerset. So the place sets in Somerset. As for the time, it was in March, because in the first stanza you can see it says it is the first Monday in March. It is specifically written, and why I put it is the starting of spring is because the word Malde in March indicates the change of weather from winter to spring, and also back in those days when a redbreast robin species appear, it shows it is the start of spring. Moving on to the language, the poet uses very descriptive language and also very direct. We will go deeper into this soon on imagery. You can see the poet uses various descriptive words, which it creates a very vivid image in the reader's mind. Moving on, it is also very religious. It uses religious language, and the poet prefer the nature mostly using by using words that is related to religious, such as bless, um, pray. Other than that, it is conversational, as the poet is very straightforward and direct. It does not have it does not have much to look between the lines, and the way the poem is written is very rhythm. There's rhythm in it, and it flows very well. That the poem seems like it is a casual conversation with his sister. And moving on to the tone, the poet writes by using many various positive words, and it gives a very joyful tone, which then leads to a very cheerful mood to the readers, and it's carefree, and it also brings some romantic, calm vibe to the readers. Moving on to the imagery, we have five types of imagery. So imagery is purposely used to create a very clear, vivid image, so the readers can imagine the poem very well. And here we have visual that sends to our sight, and auditory that sends to our hearing, tactile that sends to our touch, aesthetic which sends to our movement, and organic that is related to our feelings. It is not feelings. So here are some of the examples of visual: for large green field woodland dress, and for auditory representing silent loss. Even though it is silent, but the usage of the word silent here helps us to imagine um, a situation of there's no sound. So as for tactile, it's a mild day. It helps us to imagine the weather of the current situation. As for kinesthetic, the usage of the word speed shows the action of putting on the woodland dress. So we know it's put on quickly. And as for organic, it appeal to our feeling. For example, sense of joy, silent loss our hearts will make, shall be tuned to love. So it is something that we feel. As for sounds, we have alliteration, which is the repetition of consonants. So some of the examples are some silent loss our hearts will make, which is the repetition of the consonant S. The shall be tuned to love, the repetition of consonant T. And as for assonants, we have the repetition of vowels, and each minute sweeter than before. This is the repetition of vowel E. As for that stands beside our door is a repetition of vowel E, and grass in the green field is a repetition of vowel E. So we also have a repetition here. Repetition helps in emphasizing the line. So for example, to the bare trees and mountains bare, This helps us to picture that it is a clear view, bare trees and mountains bare. And also for this line, then come my sister, come I pray. It emphasizes on the poet wanting his sister to come along. It moving on to the figurative language. So, as I said before, this poem is written very direct and very straightforward, that there is not much for you to look between the lines. So, there is not much figurative language used, but here are some of the figurative language that I found. We have personification, which where we put the human attributes to something, non-living things or to animals. So, for example, our minds shall drink at every pour. So we know that minds don't drink. Um, and the redbreast sings from little large, and we know that birds don't sing too. Only humans drink and sing. Apart from that, we have hyperbole, where several words is used to exaggerate this statement. For this one, the example is one moment now may give us more than years of toiling reason. The word years used gives an impact to this line. As for symbolism, it is when you use something else to symbolize a different thing. So, for example, sweeter than before. We know something that happened does not literally taste sweeter, but it is used to symbolize a better time than before. So, moving on to our second poem.
All right, thank you, Shore. Now I'm going to present about the second poem, the poem of my choosing, titled A Prayer for My Daughter by W.B. Yeats. Next. And before we delve into the analysis of the poem, let me recite the poem to you first. Once more the storm is howling, and half heat. Under this cradle hood and coverlid, my child sleeps on. There is no obstacle but Gregory's wood and one bare hill, whereby the haystack and roof leveling wind, bred on Atlantic, can be stayed. And for an hour I have walked and prayed, because of the great gloom that is in my mind. I have walked and prayed for this young child an hour, and heard the sea wind scream upon the tower, and under the arches of the bridge, and scream, in the elms above the flooded stream, imagining in excited reverie that the future years had come, dancing to a frenzied drum, out of the murderous innocence of the sea. May she be granted beauty and yet not, beauty to make a stranger's eye distraught, or hers before a looking glass, for such, being made beautiful overmuch. Consider beauty a sufficient end, lose natural kindness, and maybe the heart revealing intimacy that chooses right and never find a friend. Helen being chosen found life flat and dull, and later had much trouble from a fool, while that great queen that rose out of the spray, being fatherless could have her way, yet chose a bandy-legged smith for men. It's certain that fine women eat a crazy salad with their meat, whereby the horn of plenty is undone. In courtesy I have heard chiefly learned, hearts are not had as a gift, but hearts are earned by those that are not entirely dutiful. Yet many that have played the fool, for beauty's very self has charmed wise, and many a poor man that has roved, loved and thought himself beloved, from a glad kindness cannot take his eyes. May she become a flourishing hidden tree, that all her thoughts may like the linnet be, and have no business but dispensing round their magnanimities of sound, nor by in merriment begin a chase, nor by in merriment a quarrel. Oh, may she live like some green laurel, rooted in one dear perpetual place. My mind, because the minds that have loved, the sort of beauty that I have approved, prosper but little, has dried up of late, yet knows that to be choked with hate may well be of all evil chances chief. If there's no hatred in a mind, assault and battery of the wind can never tear the linnet from the leaf. And intellectual hatred is the worst, so let her think opinions are accursed. Have I not seen the loveliest woman born out of the mouth of plenty's horn, because of her opinionated mind, butter that honed and every good, by quiet natures understood, for an old bellows full of angry wind. Considering that, considering that all hatred driven hence, the soul recovers radical innocence, and learns at last that is self-delighting, self-appeasing, self-affrighting. That his own sweet will is heaven's will. She can, though every face should scowl, and every windy quarter howl, or every billow's burst, be happy still. And may her bridegroom bring her to a house, where all's accustomed, ceremonious, for arrogance and hatred otherwheres, peddle in thoroughfares. How but in custom and in ceremony are innocence and beauty born? Ceremony's a name for the rich horn, and customs for the spreading laurel tree. Yeah. The poem is composed by W. B. Yeats, full name William Butler Yeats, was born on June 13 on the year of 1865 in Dublin, Ireland. He died on January 28 on the year of 1939. W. B. Yeats is a celebrated Irish poet who wrote everything from folklore to Irish nationalism. He was one of the most important poets of the 20th century. The poem A Prayer for My Daughter was composed on 1999 and published on 1921 in his collection of Michael Robartes and the Dancer. He married Georgie Hyde-Lees and had a daughter and a son. His daughter, Annie, was born after World War I. Next, we move on to the summary of the poem. A Prayer for My Daughter speaks about the poet's family. It demonstrates his concern and anxiety over the future well-being of his daughter, Annie. The speaker's identity is the poet, Yeats himself, who is talking about his desire for his daughter's future. Next, we have the situation experienced by the speaker. In the aftermath of World War I, it has caused agitation to the poet, who was worried about his daughter's future. The poet is worried that his daughter has to face many challenges and hardships due to the aftermath of the war. As we all know, war changes things. So during the time in Ireland, it is facing many political disarray. The poet also suggests some traits that his daughter must have in order to secure a happy future. For example, he stated that his daughter has to be beautiful, intelligent, but also humble. Next, the setting of the poem. Though it was never actually specified, it is safe to assume that since the poem is written after his daughter was born, the time of the poem was during 1919 and after World War I. However, the place of the poem was never actually specified. Next, the language and diction. The kind of language is the language typically used in a prayer or a lecture. The constant use of I, my, and she makes it a diction, and the poem is conversational and didactic. Next, we have the structure of the poem. The poem is written in a lyric form with 8 stanzas and 8 lines each, and each stanza follows the regular rhyme scheme of A A, B B, C B D C, as we can see below. Next, it has a regular rhythm, and the poem follows a metrical structure that alternates between iambic pentameter and trochaic pentameter. For example, I have walked and prayed for this young child an hour, and heard the sea wind scream upon the tower. Next, we have the tone and mood of the poem. The tone of the poem is constantly gloomy, adversary, but also confident, while the mood of the poem is anxious, cautious, and hopeful. Next, we move on to the figurative language of the poem. First of all, this poem is very rich in its figurative languages. There are many uses of simile, personification, and many more. For now, we go through the simile. That all her thoughts may like the linnet bee, from line 42. In this line, the poet is comparing two unlike things, which are his daughter and the linnet, which is a small passerine bird. It means that he imagined his daughter's thoughts to be a very diligent chirping, which are basically nice thoughts. Next, or may she live like some green laurel, from line 47. In this line, the poet compares his daughter's life with the green laurel. The poet wanted his daughter's will to persevere, even in suffering. Next, we have metaphor. Helen being chosen from line flat and dull, from line 25. Helen is a metaphor for beautiful women. The poet cites many examples of beautiful women, such as Helen of Troy, whose beauty was said to be the cause of the Trojan War. The crazy salad with their meat, from line 31. It is a metaphor for a stupid and inferior partner, which refers to his infatuation with Maud Gonne, whom he had proposed to 3 times and was rejected each time. From this line, he stated, he basically implies that Maud Gonne is stupid in choosing a crazy salad to be with her. Basically, she's saying that Maud Gonne's choosing of a man is inferior compared to her. Next, we have the personification. Once more, the storm is howling and have heat, from line 1. The storm has a behavior of howling, which is a characteristic typically associated with animals and humans. Dancing to a frenzied drum, line 70. Dancing in this line refers to the future. The poet imagined the future to be dancing along the rhythm of the drum, which implies the transience of life. Next, we have oxymoron. Out of the murderous innocence of the sea, from line 16. Oxymoron is a figure of speech that pairs two opposing words, in this case, murderous and innocent, two opposing words that are paired together to make a statement. Next, we have symbolism. There are so many symbols in this poem. Number one, once more the storm is howling, and Hafriz from line 1. The storm symbolizes the poet's feelings. Under this cradlehood and coverlet from line 2. Cradlehood and coverlet symbolizes the innocence and vulnerability of his daughter. It also symbolizes the frail safety of his daughter. And 3, whereby the haystack and roof leveling wind, line 5. The wind symbolizes turbulent forces. Whereby the horn of plenty is undone, line 32. In classical antiquity, the cornucopia, also called the horn of plenty, was a symbol of abundance and nourishment. It symbolizes, in this line, it symbolizes how a woman's abundance and nourishment are tainted. O may she live like some green laurel, from line 47. The green laurel is a plant, and it's a symbol for victory and triumph. Next, we have alliteration and assonance, which is the sounds of the poem. Alliteration, I'm not going to cover all of it, and so I'm just going to give a few examples of alliteration. Howling and Hafriz, cradlehood and coverlet. As you can see, alliteration is when a writer repeats the consonant sounds of the poem. Whereas assonance, again, I'm not going to cover all of it, just a few examples. Walked and prayed, young, hour. As you can see, it has the repeated vowel sounds of it. Next. And now we move on to the imagery of the poem. Usually there's the 5 imagery, but in this poem there are only 4, which is visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and organic. There is no tactile imagery in this poem. Now for the visual imagery, under this cradlehood and coverlet, from this we can imagine or visualize that his daughter Anne was sleeping under a cradlehood. Auditory, once more the storm is howling. This we can imagine how the storm, how loud the storm is. Next we have the kinesthetic, which is I have walked and prayed. We can imagine Yeats walking while also praying. And the organic imagery, it's imagining an excited reverie, which is we can imagine the feeling that Yeats have. Next, we move on to we're going to connect the elements to the meaning of the poem by showing the relationship between the theme of the poem and the biographical, historical, socio-political information that I have found concerning the poem. The theme of the poem is the love and anxiety of a father. Now move on to the biographical, historical of sort. In Ireland, the war is already over, but the living situation has yet to return to normal. As we can see, war takes time to heal. So the situation in Ireland is still in a state of disarray. Yeats expressed his concern on how could his daughter possibly survive the dangerous and difficult times that would surely come. Yeats wanted his daughter Anne to be a modest and intelligent woman without any intellectual hatred, because according to him, intellectual hatred is the worst hatred of all kinds. He wanted his daughter to be intelligent, humble, and have a strong opinionated mind, but without hatred. Yeats also wants her to marry a rich aristocrat, as they are the type of people of that time that value spirituality and traditions. Basically, Yeats wanted his daughter to marry a rich family so that she could secure her future. And that is all from us. Thank you, and have a nice day.